They denied me my first-class seat like I didn't belong, right in front of everyone. I stood there stunned, watching them dismiss my ticket and refuse to acknowledge who I am. The humiliation hit hard, but I refused to let it break me. I'm CEO's name, and from wherever you're watching this, stay with me. Have you ever been treated like a stranger in a place you earned to be? What I did next changed everything, not just for me, but for anyone who's ever faced unfairness with silence. This story is about dignity, power, and standing tall. I arrived at the airport early, as usual, my mind focused on the busy day ahead. Traveling was a constant in my life. Meetings, conferences, deals to close. I had built my career from the ground up. And now, as the CEO of a thriving tech company, I was used to flying first class. Not because of luxury alone, but because after long hours of work, I deserved some comfort and respect. My ticket was legitimate, booked weeks ago, with all the necessary upgrades confirmed. Walking through the terminal, I felt confident. I held my passport and boarding pass in hand, dressed sharply in a tailored suit, ready for the flight. I glanced at my phone one last time, checking emails and messages from my team, then headed to the gate. The boarding process started smoothly. Business class and first class passengers were called first. When it was my turn, I approached the entrance to the first class cabin with calm assurance. But as I reached the gate, the cabin crew member stopped me abruptly. She looked me up and down, her expression unreadable, then said firmly, "Sir, you are not allowed to enter here. Your seat is in economy." I blinked, taken aback. I showed her my boarding pass, clearly indicating seat 1A, a first-class seat. She glanced at it briefly, then folded it and said coldly, "This isn't valid for first class." I could feel the eyes of other passengers on me. Some were watching with curiosity, others avoided eye contact. I swallowed the sudden lump rising in my throat. This wasn't just a mistake, it felt deliberate. The humiliation washed over me, sharp and unexpected. I tried to keep my voice steady and polite. "I believe there's been a misunderstanding. I have a confirmed first-class ticket." She shook her head dismissively, stepping in front of me, as if blocking more than just the entrance. "You're mistaken, sir. Please take your seat in economy." Her tone was clipped, condescending. I caught a subtle sneer on her face, the kind of look that said she didn't want me there, not because of my ticket, but because of who I was. I glanced around, noticing a few crew members nearby whispering to each other and watching. The air was thick with tension. This was no longer about seating arrangements. This was a clear message. I stood my ground, calm but firm. "Ma'am, I'm entitled to that seat. I've flown this route many times and have never had this issue." She rolled her eyes and waved her hand like I was a nuisance. "You don't understand how this works. Just go to economy." The way she said it, like I was causing trouble for no reason, cut deep. I was struck by a wave of shock and disbelief. Was this how I was going to be treated after everything I had accomplished? I took a breath, trying to maintain composure. I wasn't going to cause a scene here in front of strangers, but I also wouldn't be pushed aside silently. "Please call your supervisor. I want this resolved now." She hesitated but reluctantly picked up a phone nearby. While waiting, I looked around again. Passengers whispering, some shaking their heads in sympathy, others staring as if trying to decide what to do. The supervisor arrived minutes later, his attitude no less dismissive. He questioned my ticket, my reasons, and when I calmly explained, he sided with the cabin crew. It was clear the decision was made to deny me access. My heart sank with frustration and disbelief. The moment felt surreal. I had prepared for this trip like any other, yet here I was being told I didn't belong in first class. The sting of being judged not by my merit, but by the color of my skin was unmistakable. But I knew I couldn't let this slide. I wasn't just fighting for a seat. I was standing up against disrespect and discrimination. As I was directed to economy, I felt the weight of countless others who had faced this before me. But unlike them, I was not going to remain silent. I made a quiet promise to myself that this incident would not define me, and that I would take action that was calm, calculated, and unshakable. Sitting down in economy, I started to think about the next steps. This was just the beginning. Years of hard work had brought me to where I was today. From starting out in a small office with just a laptop and a handful of clients, to leading one of the fastest growing companies in tech, the journey wasn't easy. I'd faced countless challenges, but none struck as deeply as the kind of subtle, systemic discrimination that still lingered beneath polished surfaces. I had learned early on to stand firm, to remain composed, and to fight smartly against every form of injustice. That mindset was now crucial more than ever. As I sat in the economy cabin, the sting of what had just happened didn't cloud my judgment. Instead, I focused. I took a deep breath, steadying my mind, reminding myself that emotional outbursts would only give them more power. This was a battle of wits, influence, and principle. I needed to turn this humiliation into a catalyst for change. Quietly, I reached for my phone and sent a brief message to my executive assistant. Prepare to document a serious incident involving racial discrimination on flight number. I will need a full report and evidence compiled as soon as I land. I knew that every word spoken, every reaction observed, could serve as critical proof later on. My experience running a large corporation had taught me the importance of legal and corporate protocols. I was familiar with the power dynamics at play, and I wasn't about to let a minor airline crew's ignorance go unchecked. This wasn't just about me or a seat. It was about sending a message to a system that allowed such behavior to persist. I thought carefully about my next move. The response had to be professional, unassailable, and impactful. I would not attack out of anger or seek petty revenge. Instead, I would use the tools I had, my position, my network, and my knowledge, to hold those responsible accountable and prevent this from happening to anyone else. Pulling out my phone again, I composed a concise but firm email to the airline's corporate headquarters. I detailed the incident, attaching photos of my boarding pass and notes about the crew's behavior. I requested an immediate investigation and the assurance of appropriate disciplinary action. I copied the airline's customer relations and legal departments to ensure it landed with the right people. While typing, I felt the weight of what this meant. I was about to challenge a major corporation, a company with millions of customers and reputations to protect. But I was also confident that with clear evidence and my calm yet resolute approach, I could make them listen. The message sent, I leaned back in my seat, watching the cabin discreetly. Some passengers noticed my calm demeanor and offered small nods of support. Others glanced away, unsure of how to react. But I was already thinking several steps ahead, preparing for the inevitable fallout, the media attention, and the corporate response. This wasn't just a personal grievance anymore. It was about creating accountability, about dismantling the subtle barriers that continued to exclude people like me. And I was ready to see it through. As soon as the plane touched down, I wasted no time. While other passengers gathered their belongings and prepared to disembark, I contacted the airline's management office directly through a priority line I had access to as a frequent business traveler. Calmly and clearly, I recounted the incident from boarding, the denial of my rightful seat, the dismissive and disrespectful behavior of the cabin crew, and the emotional toll it took. I handed over all the evidence I had gathered, photographs of my boarding pass, written notes of the crew's comments, and importantly, discrete videos taken by a fellow passenger who had witnessed the entire exchange. I had already coordinated with my executive assistant to prepare a detailed report to supplement my complaint. The airline's management recognized my position immediately and acknowledged the seriousness of the situation. Within hours, an urgent internal investigation was launched. The airline's legal and human resources departments reviewed the evidence. Given the clarity of the proof and my high-profile status, the company understood that swift and decisive action was necessary, not just to resolve my complaint, but to protect their reputation and demonstrate zero tolerance for discrimination. The crew members involved were immediately suspended pending further review. The airline announced they were conducting a full probe into the incident and assured that if the misconduct was confirmed, appropriate disciplinary measures would be taken. Passengers who had witnessed the event were contacted for statements, and many expressed shock and disappointment at how the situation had been handled by the cabin crew. The airline's executives called me personally to express regret and promise transparent communication throughout the process. Their tone was professional, acknowledging that this was a failure on their part to provide the respect and service every customer deserves. A few days later, the airline released a statement confirming the termination of the cabin crew members involved. They cited violation of company policy, breach of customer service standards, and unacceptable conduct that went against their commitment to inclusivity and respect. This was a clear message that such behavior would not be tolerated. Meanwhile, I shared a public statement on my social media channels. I spoke not only about my personal experience, but about the broader issue of racial discrimination that still exists in subtle but harmful ways. I emphasized dignity, calmness, and the importance of standing up against injustice without resorting to anger or violence. The response was overwhelmingly supportive, with many sharing their own stories and applauding the firm but measured approach I had taken. Industry experts weighed in as well. Diversity and inclusion advocates highlighted this incident as a critical example of why systemic change in corporate and service industries is still desperately needed. Business leaders praised the CEO's ability to turn a negative experience into a teachable moment, demonstrating leadership beyond the boardroom. Passengers who had been on the flight sent messages thanking me for addressing the issue with grace and for holding the airline accountable. Some told me they felt inspired to speak up against similar treatment they had endured quietly for years. In the end, the swift and decisive action taken not only addressed the wrong done to me personally, but also set a precedent for how such incidents should be handled in the future. It was a victory for respect, for fairness, and for the principle that everyone deserves to be treated with dignity, no matter who they are or where they come from. In the weeks following the incident, the airline took visible steps to address the deeper issues exposed by my experience. They launched a comprehensive review of their customer service policies, particularly focusing on first-class protocols and how staff are trained to handle diverse passengers. Diversity and inclusion workshops became mandatory for all employees, with an emphasis on recognizing and combating unconscious bias. The company's leadership publicly committed to fostering a culture of respect and equality, acknowledging that while progress had been made, there was still significant work to do. On a personal level, I felt a mixture of emotions. There was a strong sense of empowerment knowing that my measured response had led to real consequences and change. The relief of seeing justice served was tempered by a lingering frustration, a reminder that systemic discrimination still runs deep and that incidents like this are far from isolated. It was a stark illustration that even in today's world, respect is not automatically granted. It must be demanded and defended. The story quickly gained traction beyond the confines of the airline industry. Social media platforms buzzed with discussions about race, privilege, and the ongoing fight for equality. News outlets covered the story, highlighting the significance of the CEO's calm yet resolute approach. Conversations ignited in corporate boardrooms, academic institutions, and community groups about the subtle ways discrimination manifests and how leadership can drive meaningful change. My role as a CEO suddenly extended beyond business. I became a symbol of resilience and dignity in the face of adversity. I realized that leadership isn't just about profits and growth. It's also about standing up for what is right and using one's platform to amplify voices that are often unheard. This incident reinforced my commitment to advocate for fairness, not only within my company, but across all spaces where inequality persists. Reflecting on everything, I often think about respect, how it's not a privilege reserved for the few, but a fundamental human right. As I told an interviewer recently, respect isn't given because of titles or wealth. It's earned through integrity, courage, and the refusal to accept injustice. Standing firm doesn't just change your story, it changes the story for those who come after you. Looking ahead, I am hopeful. The changes sparked by this incident are a reminder that progress is possible when people refuse to stay silent. It's a call to action for companies to invest sincerely in diversity and inclusion, and for individuals to recognize the power they hold to challenge discrimination calmly and effectively. Together, we can build a future where dignity is the standard, not the exception.